Hello, and welcome back to Divinely Uninspired, episode 36. We have got a whole lot to talk about today, but we're joined with Jeremy.
Hello.
Hello. I can't wait to talk to you about the movie. We went and saw a movie, and we're going to review it for you. And we are with Penny.
Hey, everyone.
And joining us because he was a part of the initial conversations about this movie, and so we had to get him back on the podcast with us. Paul is with us. Paul Roughton.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Glad you're with us. So before we jump into our movie review of the Academy Award nominated Cocaine Bear, which we're not going to bury the lead. It was amazing. But I do want to do a real quick follow-up story with you all from a year ago.
Because people have been dying to find this out, I'm sure.
They have. I've actually had people stop me in the halls here at the church and like, hey, what's up with that mermaid mummy? And so a year ago, episode 17, if you'd like to go back in time, we talked about this Japanese mermaid mummy that had been discovered, and it was like a half monkey, half human fish thing. And the question was, well, what in the world is this thing? And so some scientists, some Japanese scientists, were able to convince the priests at this temple where the mermaid monkey resides, if they could scan it and do some CT scans, some x-rays, some PET scans, some MRIs, and the results are in, and it is not a real mermaid monkey thing. It is actually a mummy because, it just was mummified, but it is not, there is no monkey attached to it, but there is fish. In fact, most of it is fish.
Rusty.
Yes.
You're the only one.
I'm not the only one who cares about this. I promise. People are dying to know. So half of it is the bottom of a fish, probably a croaker, which is the type of fish that kind of makes a croaking sound because of its air bladder or whatever.
Hence the name.
Yep. And the top half was a combination of mammal hair, fish skin, likely pufferfish skin, cloth, cotton, and other fibers. This was not a real mermaid monkey.
I have a question.
Man.
Did someone make this?
So carbon dating says that it was probably made around the early 1800s.
Darwin.
That's right.
His name was Charles.
Yeah.
He made it, then planted it so we would find it.
And there are about a dozen more of these mermaid monkey creatures floating around Japan. And these scientists want to scan all of them and find out their origins.
Was it a toy for like kids?
No, what they actually believe was
like
that
an Ariel?
It was there's 14 of them specifically, but it was most likely, this is what the article says. The new analysis suggests that the mermaid was most likely created to trick people into believing that ningyos, which is what the proper noun is for these things, and their supposed healing abilities were real. However, it also shows that the tricksters behind the creation also put much more effort into stitching together the counterfeit creature than expected. Like when they open this thing up on X-ray, it's got like iron pins and all kinds of things going on. And
So not a kid's toy.
no, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. And I bet this was supposed to be like an aphrodisiac thing.
I got to admit, don't remember this conversation.
I do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Paul?
I don't think I've not been here for that. So
I remember it. I wasn't. I don't know if I needed a follow up, but
It did. You know what?
I was pretty certain that it wasn't real. Like regardless, I just assumed it wasn't.
It showed back up in the news, okay? So I would have never brought it back up, but it showed back up in the news a year later, and it was as if the heavens opened and God said, I want you to talk about this fake mummy mermaid monkey combination that isn't a monkey at all.
I'm more concerned there's 14 of them.
14 others. So there's 15 total that we know of. There could be more. We will continue to follow this closely, and in a year, we will give you another update. And so mark it down, because it was actually March of 2022 we spoke about this, and guess what? We're in March 2023.
Set your calendars by
goodness.
Mermaid Talk.
That's right. That's going to be the new name of our podcast, Mermaid Talk with Paul.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. That's the end of the show. I'm just kidding. We have a song and then we have a lot more to talk about. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're listening to Divinely Uninspired, podcast by Journey Church Shepherdsville, hosted by Jeremy Willis and me, Rusty Wilson. You can find us online at journeyshepherdsville.com. For questions or comments, email podcast@journeyshepherdsville.com. Maybe we'll feature your question or comment on a future episode. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show. So we have not hidden our affinity and love for the Cocaine Bear, also known as Pablo Escobar. And we've talked about him more than I think Jesus on this podcast.
It's not a him.
You're
right.
You're right. It was a her, at least in the film. I don't know what in reality. But this podcast almost in its entirety has been about the Cocaine Bear for the last 2 years. And the movie finally came out, and it did not disappoint. It was fantastic. And I was doing a little bit of reading on the trivia. I like to read the trivia behind movies. There wasn't a whole lot on this. The only thing of note was that Cocaine Bear was not supposed to be the name of the movie. They were like, well, it's a bear that did cocaine, so we'll call it Cocaine Bear just as like a production thing or whatever. And they could not come up with a better name than Cocaine Bear.
No, there's never been a better name for a movie.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you. So we are going to give our honest review, and there may be some spoilers in here. So if you are really concerned about spoilers with Cocaine Bear, this is your warning. We'll give you 5 seconds.
We're not going to talk about the ending. I mean, the ending really didn't. The ending didn't even matter.
No,
like it really didn't actually. When you think about it, like the ending didn't matter. That was just they had to wrap it up.
Yeah,
people knew how Titanic was going to end, and they went to see it anyway.
That's true. That's
but like
true.
the ending was kind of just like, oh, whatever. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so we won't spoil the ending. Well, let's just say this: there's definitely room for a sequel, which is already in talks.
They're doing a sequel.
Cocaine Bear 2, even more cocaine.
It's like Sharknado when they did 5 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is like truly cinema. Sharknado is just sci-fi garbage.
But the real Cocaine Bear died like almost immediately.
Right? Yes.
So like they're taking. I mean, of course, this wasn't based, but yeah. I mean, the real Cocaine Bear died like I'm pretty sure like right after he did cocaine.
Yeah.
But
So
anyway.
so let's talk about Cocaine Bear. So Jeremy, what did you think of the movie? And
I think we need to talk about a couple of things before we get into the movie. First of all, I have not seen a movie in the theater probably in 2 years, maybe even longer. Probably when did COVID? 3 years ago? 3 years. I haven't seen a movie. The amount of previews that we had to set through was it was literally it was an hour and 30-minute movie, and we set through 35 minutes of previews.
Some of the best previews that have ever been.
So there was one really funny one. I'm excited about that dog movie.
The Strays. Will Forte, Will Ferrell, Jamie Foxx.
But the rest of them were terrible. So there was that. The amount of butter that we consumed that day, because they put butter on it, and then Penny taught us the straw trick. And then I think at the end of when I got to the bottom of my bag of butter, which by the way, I ate that entire bag of popcorn in the previews. Like by the time the movie started, I had no popcorn left. There was a 1/4 inch of just oil in the bottom of my bag.
My stomach hurt that evening.
I'm surprised I'm alive. Like honestly, I'm surprised I did not have a heart attack in Cocaine Bear. Anyway, that all being said, it was one of the best movies I've seen in a while. Like, it was so self-aware of what it was, and that's what I enjoyed about it. Like, we had no idea what it was going to be about, but it was very self-aware in that this is ridiculous that we're making a movie about a bear that does cocaine, and they did an excellent job just kind of holding on to that. I laughed out loud several times. I can't tell you the last time I actually laughed out loud watching a movie. And the death scenes were some of the best ones I've seen. I mean, they were just so... It was just so self-aware. That's the best word to describe for it. I think it lived up to all the expectations that I had for it.
All right, so on a scale of 1 to 10 kilos of cocaine, how many kilos of cocaine do you give it?
9.
9. Okay, 9 kilos of cocaine. All right, Penny, your turn.
Okay, so it got me thinking about a lot of things because it's Cocaine Bear and you said that they weren't going to name it that. Do you think they have to give royalties to, like, it's the Cocaine Bear already existed before that, right? At the Kentucky for Kentucky store. So
I would imagine that it wasn't trademarked.
oh,
Fools.
that stinks for them.
No.
They could have got a lot off that. It was a good movie. It was very funny. I give it like an 8 out of 10.
8 kilos of cocaine.
Here's the thing. It kind of falls into one of those categories where like it was an awesome movie, but I think it's going to be even better when you watch it 2 to 3 times after because you get all the inside jokes in it, just like Napoleon Dynamite and Office Space, all those.
Yeah, I did need to add this. I thought going into it, it was going to do the same. Like, I thought it was going to be, we were going to enjoy it, but it's going to become, in my mind, almost, and I think it will, like a Donnie Darko, like the Big Lebowski type movies.
Cult classic.
That didn't do that well in the theater, but people that love it, like, love it. And I think this is going to be one of those movies that people will love, and yeah.
Yeah. So can we give at least like one spoiler?
Sure.
Like where the bear like has the severed leg and then does a line of cocaine off of it. Like,
Yeah, that was
the best
that was
part.
best.
that was pretty fantastic. I think that was right after the children both did lines of cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah, there are children that do cocaine in the movie. And the way they do it is hilarious. Like, it was, again, that was very self-aware.
Right.
Like, you know.
Yeah. What would a 8 or 9 year old actually do if they came across? How would they imagine you're supposed to consume cocaine when
So bad.
it just looks like powdered
Saying
sugar?
that out loud just sounds so bad.
It does, but it feels so right to say it out loud.
But I definitely think the movie overall made it, you realize that doing cocaine is bad. Like,
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't like
Right.
Oh, it didn't
pro-cocaine.
glamorize it.
Yeah, it was like, this is really bad if you do cocaine. So,
Yeah. All right, Paul, your turn.
I'm going to give it an 8, but only because I think it didn't go far enough. It met my expectations almost, but something about that trailer, I really thought there was room they could have pushed it a little bit more. But
They left
It
you
was-
wanting more.
yeah, I mean, I'd go see Cocaine Bear 2 in a second. I will say, if we're talking about the tricks that Penny taught us throughout the movie, I would like to know that also Penny also has a bag of popcorn salt with her. She is the
Paul?
popcorn master. It's like, listen, there was new
I
heights
come
of-
to the movies prepared.
Yeah.
I do.
I was
Yeah.
very
Like a real mom.
That's right.
She was our movie mom.
But unlike Jeremy, in the last month we've seen Avatar and Ant-Man, and I'd say Cocaine Bear was more enjoyable than Avatar.
Oh, yes.
2 hours shorter.
Oh, much
Yes,
better than
yes.
Ant-Man.
And Avatar was just a lot of time spent playing in the water. It was just like, oh, look, we never knew we could swim before, and now we can swim.
and I will say before, the cast was unreal. Like, the cast was
Fantastic.
fantastic.
Such a
It was
good
some of my
cast.
favorite actors. The cast was great.
Rest in peace, Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
It's his final on-screen performance.
What a way to go out, too. That end, that's good. Spoiler.
Yeah.
The end scene with it, what a way to go out.
It was fantastic. It was the perfect cap to a perfect career.
And he
Let's
looked
say that.
better than he's looked recently.
It was like the
No.
spiritual
Well, he looks
successor to
pretty terrible right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He looked rough in the movie.
Is
I
that
thought
too
he looked
soon?
better.
I think so. I think it's always too soon.
I'm sorry if Ray Liotta's family's listening, which they probably do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I like to think it was the successor to Goodfellas. Like, this was just that character.
Henry Hill.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
years later that he got back in the coke game. And
You know, that could very well be the case. I'm going to go ahead and give my review. I thought it was fantastic. The perfect amount of gore, not gratuitous, but gory enough. And like Jeremy said, some of the death scenes were just perfect. And my favorite of those, I think, was the ambulance.
Oh, yeah, that was
Yeah.
a good one.
That ambulance scene was very, very fun, and it was very self-aware, and it has a good message, which is we should take care of nature.
What if this is like the prequel to like a Yogi Bear movie?
That's how he becomes Yogi Bear.
That's how everybody loves him, is because he's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I give it 8.5 kilos of cocaine, right there in the middle between you three people. So if you go see it, which we recommend, it is.
But don't take your children.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not under the age of 17. It's not NC-17, but pretty harsh
I
language.
don't remember. Yeah, the language was bad. There was nothing.
There was no sex.
sexual scenes or
No.
anything like that. It was just a lot of a bear using cocaine and killing people.
Yeah, and that bear, she loved her cocaine. She was the cocaine bear.
And it's not. I mean, this might be a spoiler, but I think it wasn't just a cocaine bear. It was a cocaine bear family.
That's true. And they were so cute.
They were cute. Those are the cutest cocaine cubs I've ever seen.
That's
Cocaine Cubs is coming out next year.
Yeah, it is. That's the sequel. And we're excited to announce that this fall we are having Cocaine Bear Con here in Shepherdsville. Just announced.
And Jeremy has a costume.
He does. Yeah, Jeremy was going to wear a bear costume.
Yeah, it didn't come in time. Amazon let me down.
Good job, Amazon.
I think the 2 other people in the theater would have really enjoyed it. There was nobody there.
No, there was hardly anyone there. Hardly anyone at all. But shout out to the movie theater we attended, Rave on Preston Highway. Is it Rave still?
I thought it was Cinemark.
I don't know. I think you're right. Now, you know what? Forget you, Rave.
There was a lot of Cinemark commercials, so either they just don't know their own marketing but yeah.
Hey, so let's talk about more big animals. Did you know that there were sharks found in Kentucky?
What?
Isn't this crazy?
No, not really.
This is theater, people. This
She
is
did
theater.
not read.
She
Sharks
did,
in
yeah.
Kentucky.
So there was some science goings on at Mammoth Cave, which is just like an hour south of us, and some new fossils have been discovered. And it turns out that at one point in time, sharks swam in Kentucky. They found fossils of several species, over 40 total. And one of these species was an apex predator that was larger than a great white. And that was right here in the
Rusty,
old bluegrass state.
the U.S. Sun. Are we serious right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
This is a
I saw the
legit.
website
This
it came
is a
from, too.
legit news site.
it is. It is a legit news site. When you go to About Us, let's go to the About
I can't even
Us.
find the article. There's
You can't?
so much going on to the right.
Look,
the
the other articles are called Boo Boo Bust. Honey Boo Boo's boyfriend is arrested for a DUI and fleeing.
For the DUI podcast.
Yeah, right. There is an article about dance mom. Well, there's a lot of dance mom stuff.
So I just Googled sharks in Kentucky because I want to make sure this wasn't just the U.S. Sun. And there's like 20 legitimate websites like USA Today and like the New York Times and like local CBS News. And you went the U.S. Sun.
Well, because the headline said sharks discovered in Mammoth Cave. And I thought, well, there's water down there. Like maybe there is.
Well, you can go to the Falls of the Ohio and you'll get exactly the same thing as this. So this doesn't really surprise me.
But these were cave sharks.
Okay.
Are we sure they were cave sharks or their fossils just ended up under the cave?
Well, that makes them cave sharks.
No, it doesn't, because they might have died above ground, and then as there was water that made the caves, then their bones got carried down there.
You know what?
There's waterways. All these waterways. So like the water above connects to the water below.
I really don't like
So-
the way this is going.
40 different species of sharks just got
That's right.
flushed down into the caves.
That's right. Just
It might have been the same people that put the mermaids. You know, this might be just a conspiracy.
They could have been eating the sharks and they just threw the bones out the back and they just
Yeah.
washed down into the caves.
You know,
All
I
right.
thought you guys would be more excited about
Oh,
this.
I do like that though. It
I am
says,
excited about it.
Yeah, it says I'm absolutely amazed at the diversity of sharks we see while exploring the passages that make up Mammoth Cave.
And aren't sharks
Here we go.
mostly cartilage? I thought they were. I thought they had very little bones. I thought they were like 90% cartilage.
The article
I
doesn't say. But you would think with the
cannot
amount of
confirm.
Shark Week I watch that I would
Their
know
teeth
that.
and jaws are really what's important, though. So
That's
that's what
right.
they found, right?
Yes,
I think we have to
yes.
Google her.
And,
I am excited there were sharks in Kentucky. I'm not. It was a good article.
It doesn't really surprise me though. So, but I will say this, Mammoth Cave is really cool to find different types of things there. And you can actually, I don't know, like when the last time you've taken your kids to Mammoth Cave, but there are some really cool, like there's like a guy that has all the fossils, like things they found within the caves. It's really neat.
All right, so I'm just gonna throw this
What
out
about
there.
sharks though?
Just gonna throw this out there. So when you Google shark bones, the first article that comes up, 12 facts that you may not know about sharks. Sharks do not have bones.
well, then how do we find their
They're
fossils?
they're mostly cartilage. I mean, they must have found the cartilage
Well,
or their
the-
teeth. Their
their
teeth.
teeth,
Yeah,
yeah.
teeth and jaws is the only actual
Man, I feel
bone
like I said
structure
that.
they have.
So what are you
did say that, Paul.
expecting?
We got to give Paul credit.
Yeah.
Paul.
Paul knew that.
I'll watch Shark Week. Or you go to the zoo and they've got like the face, but there's nothing there. Jeremy's right. Cartilage.
You can stand
Yeah.
into it.
It's cartilage with the
Rusty,
face.
Yes.
what do you expect cave sharks to look like? I'm confused. Like, are you thinking like there's like some species of?
So do you think they
they're
still
white.
exist, or you are in agreement that like this was probably a long time ago if they were existed?
I don't want to close the book on that yet. I'm hopeful in that there might be some mini sharks somewhere floating around.
Have you
down
seen
there.
the fish that are down in Mammoth Cave?
Yeah,
They're the
they're
ones without eyes
terrifying.
and stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's what they
Yeah.
would be. These would be blind sharks, blind mini cave
They're
sharks.
white, no eyes, like all the monsters that live in caves.
That's right.
But they're just in the water.
And they have little stalactites growing off of them, so they're spiky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Camouflage, and you're like, oh.
That's right. And
What if the whole cave is just the inside of a shark?
What if Mammoth
It's
Cave
like
was
from
a
Star
shark?
Wars. It's like
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
what's that
Whoa.
creature that's like the whole planet?
I don't remember. It's a meteor worm. We probably have
Yeah.
Star Wars nerds screaming at us right now.
Yeah.
So what if all of Mammoth
Dorks.
Cave is just the inside of a shark that's consumed other
mean,
sharks?
I
Man,
I like that.
When you exit, how are you exiting?
Man.
how,
Through
let's
its
make
mouth?
let's make this movie.
Are you going up the
Let's rival Cocaine Bear.
Elizabeth Banks, you be ready for a phone call. We're calling you to direct our
cave shark?
cave shark.
This conversation went
Cocaine
sideways.
cave shark.
That would be a great movie.
I would go watch it. I would go watch it. All right. Well, let's move on to something a little more serious. So you heard of Saddleback Church? Everybody here heard of Saddleback? It's
I did when I read the thing for this.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah,
Rick Warren's church, the number one selling book of all time.
I've heard of
outside
Rick
the
Warren.
Bible.
yeah. The purpose driven everything.
I think it's number one bestseller outside the Bible, like all times. I think they said.
Is it really?
I think so.
pretty good.
It's,
Wow.
it's
Look
pretty.
that up.
It's pretty up there. I'll Google it, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I thought maybe that would have been like the novelization of like, I don't know, Jurassic
Passion of
Park
the
or something.
Christ.
Yeah, that's right. April has several copies that she can give away. So Saddleback Church is a Baptist church down in South California, Southern SoCal, Lake Forest, California specifically. And last May, not last May, May of 2021, Saddleback made the decision to ordain some women into the pastorate at the church, which, as a Southern Baptist church, it doesn't. That is not in agreement with their code of ethics, I guess, or code of pastor. I don't know exactly what the phrase is. It would be the council, the 2000 council is what they have as their like tenets of when they last agreed on these are the things that make a Southern Baptist church a Southern Baptist church. So, and the Southern Baptist Church have been facing quite a bit of well-earned scrutiny over its handlings of some abuse cases, and the Southern Baptist Convention decided to kick Saddleback Church out of the SBC over their ordination of women, which has caused some people to be quite frustrated that really this is the thing that you're wanting to disfellowship churches over. We've had abuse cases, sexual abuse cases, and things like that, and
We've had a lot of race issues too.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had a lot in the last couple of years.
yeah, and that this is the thing that you're kicking a church out for ordaining women, and so I don't know. I want to hear your all's thoughts.
So can I ask a couple things?
Ask whatever you want.
Okay, so when did the idea of ordain, like where did that come from in history? Like how did we end up that was the way that someone became, I guess, a priest, or an idea that someone became a leader of the church? I mean, when did that even start happening, that the idea that women, or that you had to be ordained to lead a church?
That's pretty much. I don't know where the word ordained came from, but I mean the idea of appointing people like separately. I mean that's Timothy. I mean that's pretty early on in the church. That's actually a fascinating question. I don't think I've ever actually studied the word ordained. To be
I
honest
haven't
with
either.
you. So I don't really know where that word came from. But the idea of that you set apart these leaders to be your pastors, elders, we use different terms, your shepherds. I mean, that's pretty early on in the church. So, I mean, that's within first century writings.
And is it specific that it's men?
Well, we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes.
Okay.
But that's part of the group discussion. So those are great questions that we can try to address here in a second. I do think with this specifically, and I try not to, I mean, I've been pretty critical of the Southern Baptists for a while. Not as a whole. Well, no, as a whole, not as individual churches or people. It just seems, we just talked about self-awareness with Cocaine Bear. It seems like they lack so much self-awareness, like right now. Like that there was an article that came out recently that I read that said last year, or in the last 5 years, I think it was exactly, they said they've had as many sexual abuse cases as the Catholic Church has had. And you know how the Catholic Church has had this bad, longstanding reputation. And I'm just sitting there going like, I mean, that's pretty bad, you know? And there's all this blowback from that. And there's all this stuff with a couple years ago, and Rusty, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, they were basically just asking the Southern Baptists to come out and say, we will not support, you know, I can't remember the language, but white nationalists and stuff, like we will not support any churches that support that. And like, it took them like 6 months to actually make a definitive statement. And it's, so you're sitting there and you're going, that should have been like the next day. Like, of course we will not support organizations that support white nationalism and it took them like, I think like 6 months to actually make an official statement. And it's like, you know, and that timeline might be a little bit off, but it was more time than it would have taken me to come up with a statement, you know? And so for this to be the thing, and then also, I mean, you know, Rick Warren and Saddleback, and I can't speak because I don't know the process, so this is just me, an opinion. It's interesting to me that they wait till the year that Rick Warren retires before they kick him out. And I think that was that a strategic move of like, you know, Rick Warren is the most well-known Southern Baptist pretty much in the world at this point, even though he's not really involved in their leadership, you know, and to kick out your largest church. I mean, it's a big, big church. So
also too, since it is such a large church, I mean, this doesn't really hurt that church. I mean, the whole point of really being a part of the SBC is so that you have their support if you need them, right? Like, so why would that, who was that?
I guess
you're right over there.
Excuse me.
Sounds like you're blowing it.
That was a sound effect.
I broke digital wind. That was, sorry.
I just got that.
An email came through.
No, I would think that, I mean, and like I said, this is from an outsider's perspective because I'm obviously not in the Southern Baptist movement. And I actually met Rick Warren one time, actually at Exponential, where we're going next week at a conference.
Did he smell good?
He was awesome.
I always imagined
he
that he
gave me a
smelled
handshake.
really nice.
Yeah, they used to do a Bible study. He used to run it every morning. He would fly in, do these Bible studies. Wasn't even speaking at Exponential, just came in and did a Bible study every morning. And the first morning, there was only like 60 of us that showed up because nobody knew Rick Warren was doing it. And then like the word got out that it was Rick Warren, and the next day like half the conference was there. But I
like to sniff famous people.
To me, that's really weird.
I hope this comes out.
Yeah.
He gets wind of that before.
Yeah. To me, this all is bad for the Southern Baptists, and if I'm Saddleback, I probably don't, you know, because I think they are obviously self-supporting. They don't need a thing. So to me, you know, if I'm Saddleback at this point, I'm like, okay, you kicked us out. Right. I mean, that's just my take on it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to imagine that this, not that Saddleback, I would have to imagine they're not hurting financially, but this would certainly free up some of the money they as a church.
Because you have to give a percentage of your income to the Southern Baptist Convention if you're a Southern Baptist church, and it's a pretty large percentage.
Yes, and so I think what it seems like this may be. Which it's a silly straw that breaks the camel's back, but I do think that this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of SBC-affiliated churches that just say, well, wait a second, so we're not willing to deal with these other very public, shameful, you know, criminal things, but we're willing to deal with this other thing, which... let's talk about now. Is this ordination of women, like, is this something that is something to break fellowship over? And what do we think about that? And we're going to give each of us an opportunity to kind of share our thoughts or ask questions about it, and what the Bible says about it, and what do we do with what the Bible says about it? So, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Jeremy. I've already asked my questions.
I knew we were going to talk about this. I think this is a subject that, and you could ask my wife and people that know me. This is one of those subjects, and I don't want to say about the word ordained, but really just women in ministry, women's involvement in church, because I still wrestle with some of it because I'm working through a lot of stuff. I grew up in a very conservative church. The only roles that women were allowed to play were Sunday school teachers, nursery workers, fill communion cups, you know, I mean, that clean the church. I mean, that was kind of it, or a secretary if you want to work at the church. So all of the leaders at our church were men. The only female leader was the children's director. And she was clearly not called a children's minister. She was called children's director. Then I went to a super conservative Bible college, probably one of the most conservative ever. And I mean, we would take classes on this very subject, and we're taught a lot of things. And so I came out of that, and you could ask my wife, like, very early on, like, I was 100% like, women should not be in ministry, women should not be in leadership. And that wasn't that I actually believed that. It goes back to that thing that I've said before to our church. Everything you believe is either taught or experienced. That's just what I was taught. Like, that's what I grew up with. That's what I was taught. And so complementarianism is kind of the two views, complementarianism, I forgot to say. Egalitarianism. So we were created equal, or we were created separate. And so my view of this has changed so much in probably the last 10 or 12 years. And I will say, everything you believe is taught or experienced. One of the things that happened to me that changed and started the change of my viewpoint was something that I experienced, and that was having a daughter. And that really changed my thinking about that position. And so honestly, I've been on a 10-year kind of journey of figuring this out. You can speak to my wife. I mean, my views on this have changed. I'm not still 100% where I land on some of it, because I do think there's some biblical texts that seem to speak one way, but, you know, I've kind of tried to figure out how a way to work around some of that stuff, or really dive deeper into those texts and see what was really said. So my view has changed a lot about this. Obviously, we have women here at Journey that are in leadership roles outside of just children's. We have women on my leadership team that help me run the church and make decisions and stuff like that. So my view has changed a lot. I mean, 12 years ago, there's no way I would have done that. And so I've learned a lot, been taught a lot, and we can get into what the Bible says about it. But I just want to say that statement to start with is that, and it's still an ever-evolving view. What I will say is, what SBC is doing and done, I can 100% tell you I don't agree with that. Like, that's clearly not something I'm in agreement with. Now, the other fine talking points of it is more where I'm still working through some of that. But, you know, just the write off women in church in general, and just say you can teach kids, you can change diapers, you can talk to other women and clean the church and do communion cups. Like, I'm way past that. Like,
did you all grow up in churches that had a cutoff for, well, you can teach boys until they hit like age?
Yeah, they couldn't teach us in high school.
Yep. Yeah. What? Because now you're quote unquote a man.
Yeah. So we had a female middle school teacher, and then when they reached high school, it had to be men. Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in a very similar situation. So
yeah,
I feel like a lot of times, and this is for most things as you get older, you found in your life, being a white man is really pretty easy.
Yeah,
I recommend it. 10 out of 10. I'd do it again. You just see like, oh, everything seems pretty straightforward, and you see something like this, and you go, oh, it's hard being a woman sometimes. I don't even understand like why, you know, even in your own church, to not be, you know, to be persecuted or to not be allowed to do something to help, and you know, witness to people and do things like that. Work in the church because you're a woman. Like,
why are you
Penny,
looking at me, Paul?
because you're the only
you're the woman. Everybody's looking at Penny like, are we saying anything that defends the woman in the room?
Yeah. We empower here. I joke around a lot. I like to make a good sexist joke at my friend Penny a lot, but I mean, I don't understand.
Paul has 2 daughters, by the way, and he's a
yeah.
great girl dad. Like,
Well,
he's pretty awesome.
And a very strong, independent wife.
Very. Some would say too much.
I'm married to the same, almost exact same person. Just, I mean, not the same woman. That
They
would
share a
be
wife.
weird, yeah.
We're very progressive here.
That's right.
We haven't broached that yet.
You've heard of sister wives, but have you heard of brother husbands?
Oh, no.
Oh man.
That sounds terrible.
Gosh.
Penny, do you have any more thoughts?
Or questions?
Yeah.
Well, I had a couple questions, obviously, but I grew up in a thriving Baptist church. And when you grow up in something that seems to be going really well, you don't question what's going on within it, right? So I came up in the same situation, which was men basically ran the church. We did have women who were secretaries or as the children's director of the church, but you didn't question it then because it was working and it was thriving. But as I got older and when I left the Baptist church, I started to realize, I'm like, wow, there's so much more that we can do within it. And I don't want to go too deep because I don't want to call out anything, but I have a situation from before Journey, where I came from a position in a church and they were wanting to hire a man instead of a woman over it because of this particular reason. So I understand like what that feels like, and it doesn't feel good because you want to be treated as an equal, but also I do agree with Jeremy that we're all created differently, both men and women. We feel things differently, we see things differently, and to be able to use those gifts that have been given to us for the right reasons in the right place and time. But I don't know where I really stand on what the Bible says, because I don't know specifics or if there's language that isn't quite clear. So I'm curious what Jeremy's going to say next.
So the passage that most people turn to when it comes to women in ministry and their defense of a complementarian position, or a position where a woman is limited in what she is able to do in the church, it comes from 1 Timothy 2. And the specific passage is verse 11. But I'm going to read to you 1 Timothy 2, and I'm going to start at verse 8, because you kind of need to get a little bit beforehand before you just jump into the verse, which is a really bad habit that we do. We tend to read the Bible verse-centric, where it's like, okay, well, this is the verse I want to pull out, when in reality you should be going like 5 verses before and 5 verses after at a minimum, so that you're given some context as to what the passage is talking about. It's where we can cherry pick things like Jeremiah 29:11, where I have a promise for you, not to be afraid, and I have a future that you will prosper. And people are like, yeah, that's my promise. It's like,
Well, the promises are going to be slaves, so there's that.
They're right. So verse 8 says, starting in verse 8, and this is from the NIV. Therefore, I want the men everywhere to pray, lifting up holy hands without anger or disputing. I also want the women to dress modestly with decency and propriety, adorning themselves not with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women who profess to worship God. And then this is where it really gets into it. Verse 11, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. For Adam was formed first and then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with prosperity. Now, there is a whole lot there that we're not going to have time to touch on today. But let's talk a little bit about the letter to Timothy.
They really need to read that more at weddings. I feel like when they
I used to, and
they have the submit weddings. Have you seen those?
Yes.
No, you heard about my wife. We did not have one of them.
Yes. They are.
There's weddings where the woman sits at the man's feet, and it's a submission ceremony.
This is making me uncomfortable. Let's move on.
I'm just saying.
You are adorned with gold and a big hairstyle.
This makes you
over there.
uncomfortable. Sharks in Mammoth Cave and mermaid monkeys don't make you uncomfortable. Yeah.
They're less controversial.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of things to remember anytime we approach a scriptural passage, which is context is really important. And sometimes we just read things, we just jump in and we assume that, well, it's just the same everywhere for all time, for all people. And Timothy was in Ephesus, which the patron god, the pagan god of that city, was a female god and led by a female priesthood. And it was
a cult, really.
Yeah, it was
Artemis.
a sex cult.
Yeah,
it was,
sex cult. Artemis.
And so we have to recognize that part of what is at play here is that it has primarily been a religion a sexual religion dominated by women in this particular community. And so that's not a definitive I'm not making a definitive statement about what Paul is saying for all women everywhere for all time. But that is important to know about this specific scenario, what was happening in Ephesus that Paul was aware of as a pastor of what would be best for the church, because there was a fear that some of these women, as they come to know Christ, would syncretize their previous religious practice with their new religious practice, and that would be a really bad thing for the church.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's not the only one. I mean, I think too, the reminder when people read these texts is not only context, but also remembering that it wasn't written in English. And so some of these words can be massaged and worked through. The other big one is 1 Corinthians 14, which basically almost says the same thing, that women should be silent and not speak in church and stuff like that. But if you read that whole chapter, what you find out is that women aren't the only ones he's talking to. He's talking to people that want to speak in tongues and speak over people and all of this. And it almost, that beginning of that chapter and that end of that chapter kind of ends with, like, this should be an order of service. Like, this should be an orderly service. You don't want people just going in like chaos. And so, apparently maybe in that context, there were some women who were speaking over their husbands and that type of thing. Because if you turn back just 3 chapters earlier in chapter 11, Paul is like praising the women that are praying out loud and prophesying, which would be like the same thing as preaching in that same church. And so it can't be both things. So like, and again, like what Rusty was saying, like, it's not a definitive statement that maybe there isn't more to that, because that's where my studying and evolving comes from. But there is some contextual clues there that maybe this isn't like a once for all kind of statement. This might be more local to what's going on in those two environments. Because those are the big ones, I think, would be, if you can think of any more, I don't know, 1 Corinthians 14 and that 2 Timothy or 1 Timothy seems to be the big ones.
Yeah, those are the two where people most often go. And I think, Paul also, throughout Romans, especially Romans chapter 16, he's going through a list he's kind of thanking and acknowledging people who have been important in his ministry, in his spiritual development. And he mentions several women. Probably the most important he mentions is a woman named Junia, who he says was an apostle. Before even he himself was an apostle, Junia was an apostle. Now, there was an attempt a couple of decades ago to turn Junia, which is always and has forever been a female name, which is what shows up in our earliest manuscripts of Scripture, to turn it into a masculine form. And that was not based on evidence. It was based on, surely they wouldn't have had an apostle that was a woman, so this must be a mistake, and we will make it, instead of Junia, make it Juno.
Yeah, I think from that list in 16, though, the one that changed it for me was Phoebe. Mm-hmm. And I think, so if you understand the ancient world, so Phoebe is the one that actually takes the letter from Paul to Rome. And so in their world, and we have other examples of this, more than likely she's the person that actually read the letter as well. And so Paul entrusts a woman to take it to Rome, to lead it, to give it to the church leaders. More than likely, most scholars believe she's probably the one that read it out loud. And then think about this, and there's no evidence of this like in the text, but it would make sense. Imagine you're hearing this book of Romans and you ask questions. Well, who are you going to ask those questions to? Probably Phoebe, who got it from Paul. So the first person to expositorily explain the book of Romans, which might be one of the most important letters outside the Gospels, like, was probably a woman that explained that first. And so like that was like, so maybe Paul isn't all one-sided here. There's, and there's other examples that stick out to me. N.T. Wright talks about in John chapter 20, the first person to see and tell somebody about a resurrected Jesus is a woman, Mary Magdalene. And, so that's it's not like, Jesus like, all right, go back and get Peter so we can, make this thing official. Like, he entrusts it to a woman, and then the woman goes and tells the men what she's seen and experienced. Another one that stuck out to me, this all came out of have you read that book, The Icons of Christ?
I have not.
It is so dense, but there's a whole section in there about, it's this really good book, and it's one of the books that's helped shape my views, and it's still shaping my views. They talk about that in the book of Acts, that we see early on that the women are being persecuted just like the men. And in the Middle East, even today, in most places like that, in times of war and tension and all this stuff, women are allowed to go about their business because they're not seen as a threat. And yet we have this example of these women being persecuted in Acts early on, especially by Saul, who becomes Paul. And the whole thing is about what's fascinating about that is they were viewed as threats, whereas most women in this culture were never viewed as threats. But because they might have been conceived or perceived as leaders in the church and in this early movement that, Saul and the Pharisees are trying to wipe out, they were persecuted as well because they were viewed as threats. And you wouldn't view somebody in that culture as a threat unless they actually were coming from a place of leadership or they scared you, you know. So interesting stuff. But
yeah, it is. And so I get to a place with this where and with lots of different topics when it comes to your beliefs about the Bible or how the church should function or whatever, you know, is this an essential issue? Is it one of those that you think is important enough to say, no, I can't worship with these individuals? Because that's what the SBC has done. It has said, no, this is a test of our fellowship as a community, and you are no longer able to be a part of our community over this. And I just get to the point where it's like, no, I don't think that's that important. It's a break fellowship over the fact that they want to ordain and did ordain women. That's my personal approach. I also have an 8-year-old daughter who every time I ask her what she wants to do when she grows up, she says, I want to be a pastor like you. And so I come with, Jeremy talked about having a daughter and the way that changes that. My kid tells me she wants to be a pastor. It's a hard job, but I'm going to encourage that. And I'm not going to stand in her way. I'll be honest with her about the difficulties that you'll face in it. But I mean, she wants to serve God, and she has an excitement about it. So who am I to tell her, well, no, because
it's like quiet.
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you who, the SBC.
That's right. The SBC.
I think she's not going to college here in Louisville.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Well, I have a question about what you were saying. Are there resources to look into things like this? Because
yes,
growing up in a church, can you list some of these? Because I've
So
this is, as a white man, never hear any of these things.
So the first book that I read that's probably pretty surface level, and I'm sure Rusty can give some resources. The Parakeet, Scott McKnight, the Blue Parakeet. It's really good. It got me thinking. It was the first book I ever read, because what he does, and this is when I was still in a very much like men. Men need to lead the church, men need to do all this stuff. I read that book, and he sets up this case, and like he almost gets you being like, yeah, this is right. And then at the end, he's like, oh, yeah, all this has been about women in church. And you're like, oh, man, like you got me believing what you were saying. And then you tell me what you're actually talking about. So that was a good one. There's several other ones. I mean, N.T. Wright's got some stuff. And you can read articles about this. But the book I just am working through, it's called The Icons of Christ. It is incredibly dense. But it's probably the most thorough one that I've seen in a long time. And it's specifically about women being ordained and women in ministry, not just women like in church or whatever. Oh, there's sections about that, but it's a hard one to work through. But anyway, there's lots of resources out there. And here's the thing: those are the people I'm reading, and I think Rusty will agree. There's really smart people on the other side too, and that's sometimes my tension in this point is that there are people that I respect that aren't just doing it because their denomination or whatever believes this. Like, there's really smart people that I respect that have the opposite view that I have. And so I try to be careful sometimes making definitive statements. But I tend to lean towards the more I can't ever say that word. Egalitarian view, which is more that we are equal. And that, a lot of it's based on Galatians 3:28, that there's no male or female now in Christ and all that stuff. But there are lots of resources for both sides.
Yeah, so one of the best books I've ever read on it. It's an older book, but it's called Women in Ministry: The Four Views, and they give you the entire spectrum. So they have a different person give their reasoning for, and all of them use the Bible for the full spectrum. So no, women can only do very limited things in the church, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is no, there's nothing in the church that a woman can't do. And the first, I like the way they did it, because they had a man and a woman each take a point on them. So it's a really good one, and it has a lot of scripture references and places to dive in and see a little bit more about why they think that, which is really good. A more modern take would be one that just came out a couple of years ago called The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Beth Allison Barr. and she is a historian. She is not a theologian. She is a Christian. Her husband is a pastor, and she is heavily involved. She teaches at a university, and so it's another very good book. I have read that one, and then it's sort of a different take, but Rachel Held Evans, she is a novelist. She passed away in 2019 from the flu, of all things. But she wrote a book called A Year of Biblical Womanhood, where for 1 year, she followed the biblical call for how women should live their lives, including living out in a tent during a certain period of time each month. And she chronicles that in this book, and it's a pretty fascinating book, actually, just looking at what that looks like in a modern context.
That sounds good.
So there are lots of resources out there.
Yeah.
And this is it's really one of those things that the rest of the world, Christian church, the rest of the church has kind of moved on from this.
Well, even in the United States, this seems to be, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to pick on the SBC because there's other denominations that hold this viewpoint, but it's pretty regional. Like, I mean, you go out west, in Saddleback's in California, which, I mean, you can say whatever you want about California. I mean, it's gotten weird out there, but, to them, that's probably not a big deal out there, and a lot of the churches are probably like, what's the big deal? But because of where we are and our proximity to some of the more traditional denominations and their viewpoints, it becomes a bigger deal here than it does other places. But most of the world, like Rusty said, it's a non-issue. So,
well, I always have a trouble with biblical fights like, that's a good word when it's regional in the country. You can just tell, like, oh, you're going in with maybe more on your mind than what's in the Bible, and then there's fights about it, and you're like, you're just taking a fight from somewhere else and trying to put the Bible in the middle of it. So.
And a lot of that goes into just the fundamentalist view of, I mean, the Bible, but sometimes that also aligns itself politically. So, fundamental is just not very fun. They have the word fun in it. They're not fun. So.
They're mental.
Hey.
Oh, I love being a dad and getting to make those jokes. Hey, so we are going to do one last thing before we wrap up. And, first I'm going to tell you a couple of things that are going on here at Journey, and then we'll do our one last thing. So we have our ESL class is beginning on March 13th. If you would like to volunteer with that, there is still room and opportunity. We have a short-term mission trip to Dawson Springs, Kentucky, where those tornadoes did so much damage back in 2021, December 21, and March 20th through the 24th. If you can't be there for the whole week, that's okay. We have a 1, 2, 3, or 4 day option, and it's free no matter what you choose. CIY and summer camps are now open for registration. Penny, you want to talk a little bit about White Mills?
White Mills is happening for all age groups. We are going in July for our 1st through 5th grade. It's a whole week. And we also have a middle school camp that we're attending in June. And this year we're also doing a buddy camp, which is for our younger 4 and 5-year-olds, and one overnight for our kindergarten, 1st grade. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm going to attend all camps except for the middle school. That'll be Kyle. So if you want your kid to go, they're going with a good group of people, and we're going to have a great time.
Great. Thanks, Penny. And then on March 25th, we have a family ice skating event. So that is not just children, not just youth. That is for the whole family. And it's at the Iceland Sports Complex. It's $25 for the whole family or $9 per individual.
And signups end for that next week.
Next week on the 10th?
Yes.
Correct? Yes. Mm-hmm. So on the 10th, you can no longer register for that. So get on that Journey app and sign up today. Okay, so I was perusing one of my favorite Christian resources, which is Relevant Magazine, and they had an article on the best pastor brain farts of all time. And so I went through these, and a lot of these are old, where, before pre-YouTube days, even, where somebody was just recording this. And I don't know, where did we get videos online before YouTube?
I remember just Footystone videos.
I was saying the same thing.
So real quick, just let me ask, if we should talk about something. Do you remember having conversations with people pre-cell phones that in your mind now you texted them even though you didn't? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where that comes from, but there's like memories I have of me like texting people but it was before I ever had a cell phone. And I'm like, well, clearly that was a phone call. But in my mind, I don't. Anyway, so it's just something weird. Go ahead.
So
it's the Matrix.
Right. So what I'm going to post a link to this because we don't have time to play all of them. One of them actually is a guy who was a local, he was a part of the ministry area that we are in, and it's actually the first one, and it's a pretty funny blooper where he can't get it together after he does it, and I want you to watch it. I want you to watch it. It's really funny. Do you know that guy?
What is it?
I can't remember. You know, I don't. You know what?
Do I know that guy? I can't.
Yeah,
remember
that guy. He used to go to White Mills.
Oh yeah, I do remember him.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name either, but I do remember him.
Well, shout out to you, Guy.
You guy.
That's right. That's his name. You Guy. He is
the one about the tents.
Yes, this is.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
I remember this.
He was talking about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and what he was attempting to say was that Lot pitched his tents near the city. But he said he reversed some letters in the first word and the last word. So it wasn't that the tents were pitched. It was something else. And what's really funny is that the footage is grainy, but you can see his eyes go real big as soon as he does it.
This has been around for a while.
It has been.
Yeah.
And the church cannot get it together, and he's like, "Stop laughing!" and you heard nothing. It's very, very funny.
As the person who does the video in the back here, that is my hope every Sunday that something like that happens, and it has yet to. But
yeah, well, it's all live stream now, and so what I wanted to do is I just wanted to hear what's the most embarrassing blunder you've made in front of people. It doesn't have to be on stage, but it has to be in front of people. And I'll go first because mine's not anything too terrible. But when I was still in college and I had an opportunity to lead worship for a week of camp, we were doing a song, and I started the song. It was in the right key, but in the wrong octave, which in music means that I started the song higher than I should have. So, Penny, you want to explain octaves?
I mean, it's just funny. Let's just say if Rusty were singing in a key, I could do the octave higher than him, but we'd be singing in like melody.
Yeah. So it'd be the same thing. However, I thought, I bet I can hit this. And so we hit the high part of the octave. And I mean, my voice goes full on, puberty, adolescence, it was.
That's great.
And it was one that it wasn't like there was a section in the song where I could just stop and acknowledge like, hey, that just happened and we're going to move on. I just had to play it off like it didn't happen. And then everybody had to talk to me about it afterwards. They were like, so that was interesting. I was like, yeah, I know. I know. So I learned pretty early on that like when you make a mistake in leading worship, go ahead and just say like, well, that wasn't good. Like, let's try that again. So who wants to go next? Share your embarrassing blunder.
Man, I feel like I could do a whole podcast on this. Like seriously, the amount of times that I've embarrassed myself up on a stage, and just because I've been doing it like since I was little, my parents have stuck me up on like a stage at church. I wasn't going to tell this story because I have done some stupid stuff. So one time, I think it was like 8 or 9, and I got up on the stage to sing, and I did my song. Well, I was really nervous. My stomach was really messed up. Like it was just very nerve-wracking being up there at 8 or 9 years old. And I kind of just let one slip. It was very silent. Like nothing like happened except for it was silent. Well, it stunk so bad. So the pastor came up like
you farted.
Oh yeah, absolutely
okay,
on the stage. Like nobody could hear it, right? So I was like, okay, good, but it was bad.
One of those
like,
silent but deadlies.
It was very stinky. Well, the pastor came up right after and he looked at me. He goes, "Penny, that was so lovely." I'm like, all I could think about was that he was smelling that atrocious fart that I let out like right before I left the stage, and I think about that all the time. Like that's terrible. So don't like.
I love that story. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've done some really like stupid stuff on the stage.
What about you, Paul? Ever any blunders in front of people?
Not on a scale like that. I feel like
It's hard to follow that one up.
Well, and I got to a point where I just decided I just don't want to be in front of people anymore. I was in a movie that we made, like a my friends used to do this in high school and college, and I was the star of one. And I saw that, and every time I watched it, I'm like, never again. That's how I got into doing
What kind of movie?
It was a whitesploitation movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a 70s movie called Dolomite.
Yes.
And
yeah.
it was Dola White. And I had longer hair. It was pretty great. It was awful. And,
Does it still exist?
On VHS?
Could we have a watch party?
Oh, no. No. And then I said, I mean, I don't know if I've been on camera since then. That's 20 years. So it's just, you see that, you go,
I need to see this.
I'm best behind the scenes. So,
all right.
But, we had this conversation earlier. The most embarrassing thing to me, I'll just drive home and think, did I say something dumb to somebody today? So those kind of things, I'm not built for the stage like you three. Yeah. Jeremy?
All right, Jeremy, you've probably spent more time on stage than anyone.
Yeah, there's I've done some dumb things. The most famous one, though, was years ago. We were doing White Mills Middle School camp, and we did this week. We called it Gentleman's Week. And so we encouraged the guys. We had Old Spice and Brute. We found Brute and put Brute out. So they would put aftershave on and put cologne on. And at dinner, if there was a girl sitting next to them, they were supposed to take their plate up and all this stuff. So it was this whole thing about just being gentlemen all week long.
Wait, so you had man church?
Yeah, we had man church.
Man camp. Camp.
Now remind you, this is White Mills Gentlemen's Society. White Mills, okay? So that week was one of the first weeks that we had some diversity in some of the churches that were there. So we had 2 primarily African-American churches that had joined us that week. And the first 3 times on stage that I referred to the White Mills Gentlemen's Club, I referred to it as the White Males Gentlemen's Club. So then, after I did that, and we're talking, these were fairly large churches. So, there's probably 200 campers there. Probably 30 or 40 of them were African-American. And so I said white males 3 times at least. And so, they would, tell me, nobody was mad about it or whatever. So then, in my mind, I was I've got to say it right. I've got to say it right. So I'm going up on stage. And I'm talking about because it was part of the week that we had done. So it's my night to teach and all this stuff. And I get up on stage and I literally go, I'm glad you guys are participating in the White Men's Gentlemen's Club. I just kept saying, I don't think I ever said it right the entire time. And so they gave it to me pretty good. And I felt horrible. And so what they did afterwards was the youth minister of that church was actually a white guy. And so he had I still remember this. It was the worst I ever felt in my life. He had all of his kids. They were in on it. They knew that I didn't mean anything by it. They all waited for me outside because they wanted to talk to me about my language and my behavior.
Your lack of sensitivity.
So I walk outside and there's 30 African-American students standing there and Josh, and he's like, hey, they're ready to go home. They just don't feel comfortable here, all this stuff. And I literally felt the worst I've ever felt in my life. And then I'm about to lose it, and they all start laughing at me and pointing at me, and so that happened. I've definitely preached and taught in front of people with my fly undone, and not just undone you didn't notice, undone. That's happened twice.
Wait.
Yeah, I don't know where this is at all. But.
Okay.
So all right.
Your boxers were showing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
so
good.
what I mean. But yeah, that's what I mean by that is with jeans. Sometimes when the zipper's undone, it's still holds.
It's taut.
It's taut. Yeah. But khaki shorts don't do that. So if you ever have had your zipper unshort and khaki shorts, so yeah, I think those are White Mills too. That I had my fly undone and just realized afterwards that, yep, there's my underwear.
So make sure to sign up for White Mills this summer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So and I've said cuss words accidentally and, but I'm pretty good. Paul's apparently waiting for me to mess up.
Listen, I've said several times that we need just a clip of Jamie just putting her head down and shaking her head that we could throw up sometimes. Some of the things that has been said.
Yeah. So, but some of those are on purpose.
I would just assume all of them are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was.
Yeah. I definitely, though, you're talking about the video. I remember when I taught one time, I was doing this lesson, and this is a good one. I was using a clip from the movie Braveheart, right? And so back then, as you remember, this was before video, you can pull it up. So you had to have a VCR there with it rewound to the exact moment that you wanted it to come on. And the scene that I wanted them to talk about, I can't remember the lesson I was talking about, is like directly after the scene where him and his wife like
Consummate their
marriage. And it's like in the moonlight and there's nudity. Right, that's the best way to describe it. So in my mind, I had got it past that point, and I go to hit play, and sure enough, that's the first thing. It's almost like that's the part that I rewound it to was the sex scene, and I was just sitting there.
Some
like,
might call that a Freudian slip.
Yeah. And I remember feeling like, oh gosh, yeah.
That is terrible.
Yeah, and I remember telling all the kids, do not tell your parents about this.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, we could get into a whole lot of trouble telling youth ministry stories.
Oh yeah, most of mine come from youth ministry.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I don't even know what you were preaching about that you had to show that exact moment.
I'm wanting to say that we were talking about dating, and because like right after that scene, there's like something he tells her, and it's like this very intimate thing, like about like his love for her, and like that he's loved her, and like all this stuff. And so I was using that as like, because I used to be obsessed with Braveheart, so I was just using that as an illustration, but literally it was like right after, the video pops up, and it's the in the naked moonlight,
All right.
That's
well,
fun.
that's a pretty big blunder.
Yeah.
Sharing porn with your students.
The next week, record attendance.
That's right. Guess what our church does? Well, that is going to be it for our show today. We are so glad you joined us, and we will see you again soon.